Good morning. Welcome to Zen with a Smile. I was thinking of the best word to describe our everyday life. Living life. How life finds you. Instead of how you find life. Living in harmony. Living in correctness, at least for me, involves letting the world come to me. And trust me, you don't have to go out there and chase it, because it will come. And in my experience, everything I've chased has turned to dust. Not really the correct thing to chase. And on the other hand, letting life come to me, it means accepting what it brings. And in that acceptance is grace on one hand, and of course surrender on the other hand. Surrender of your will and live in grace with what comes your way. It seems to me, or it has been for me, that what the world brings to me is exactly what I need to take a look at. Exactly correct to help me on my growth towards spiritual maturity. And what's come to me recently is, I've mentioned before how embracing the ordinary, recognizing the beauty in everyday events. And another word came to me, mundane. Instead of ordinary, mundane. So I went to Google it, Googled it, and found out immediately how I was meant to use this word. Let me go to my trusty iPad again and read to you. This is definition 1. Most of us accept lacking interest or excitement, dull. His mundane, humdrum existence. Synonyms for this word is humdrum, dull, boring, tedious, monotonous, tiresome, wearisome, prosaic, unexciting, uninteresting, uneventful, unvarying, unvaried, unremarkable, repetitive, repetitious, routine, ordinary, everyday, day-to-day, run-of-the-mill, commonplace, common, workaday, usual, pedestrian, customary, regular, normal. And none of these exactly suited the purpose that was given to me for today's topic. And I looked down, as I always do. I love the dictionary. I love words. I love using them. I love looking them up. I love to increase my vocabulary. Nothing quite makes me quite so happy as the simple act of finding and learning to use a new word. Most of you, myself included, has a written and reading vocabulary much larger than our verbal usage. In fact, most conversations, in English at least, are limited to a very select and few words when you get right down to it. So the idea of learning how to verbalize a word, and that means pronouncing it correctly. And I have to listen because I never learned to read that those little letters that tell you how a word sounds. So I need to find it and listen to it. So a verbal dictionary might be really useful for me. And I'm sure there's an app or somewhere on the internet that you can find it. Maybe in an English learning environment. But I found in those that is lacking the larger vocabulary, teaching survival skills, what's necessary for minimum effective communication in English. So we went to the second definition of this earthly world rather than a heavenly or spiritual one. According to the Shinto doctrine, spirits of the dead can act upon the mundane world. Synonyms for this definition number 2: earthly, worldly, terrestrial, material, temporal, secular, non-spiritual, fleshly, carnal, sensual, and sublunary, the mundane world. So this fills my needs. But what I want to do is look for is to elevate what they're considering the realms of the mundane, lifting them up in an offering, in a testament to the heavens. Because this is exactly what's required of us. We hear the term bandied about, mindful living. Yes, indeed. In the ordinary, in the mundane, lies the seeds of the sacred. Acceptance of what comes, as I mentioned earlier. Knowing no fear, as you know that you neither die or born. Essentially, we're the great unborn. So combining these two elements, letting life come to you, and truly eradicating fear from your life, which necessitates deep reflection, deep pondering, and a brutal honesty to face yourself as you are, to face yourself as you find yourself, not as you hope, wish, desire to be, the nitty-gritty you, naked before the world. or at least naked before your deep gaze, your deep exploration. Honesty. People misunderstand honesty to mean being truthful with others. And yes, indeed. But this kind of comes with the spiritual venture, the spiritual exploration, the transformation from progressive to permanent awakening. This honesty comes with the territory, but an honesty that's maybe, or surely more important, is a brutal honesty with yourself. Having grown up in a world of delusion, a world of Maya, it seems to me that we ourselves are most deluded about who and what we are. Who and what we are in the mundane, ordinary word. Not in other eyes, our eyes. So this brutal self-honesty, necessary. Every little thing has to be pulled from your storage, no matter how deeply it's been blocked. And trust me, the things that are really at the center of what we don't like about ourselves are deeply buried. And you really have to find, maybe you need special passwords to access that part of your hard drive. So, accepting life as it comes your way, understanding, embracing fearlessness. When you practice these two things, when you've accomplished these two things, and this could be lifetimes of work. I feel like I've been working on them for lifetimes. That's where equanimity comes. Equanimity includes also grace and surrender. So there's 4 elements for you to work on. Let the world come to you. Face your fears and get beyond them. Surrender and accept. Accept yourself exactly as you find yourself. No conditional tense here. Should have, could have, would have any relevance. So equanimity leads to grace. And I'd like to go back and talk about the four paths. And that means going back to my iPad and finding them again. But right off the top of my head, I know Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. And I also know karmic yoga, the yoga of action, coupled with compassion. But Raja, the loving kindness. And I mentioned last week that if whoever practices one of these yogas, karmic, bhakti, jhana, or raja, see, I got it. I didn't have to look. I meant it's there somewhere. Just exercise, just finding it. Yeah. The practitioners of each of these paths, except with the exception of jhana yoga, all will say that their way was the easiest way. Karma, selfless action. Maybe that's best for you. But what I found that these teachers, I haven't been able to stumble across it yet. I'm not saying that unequivocally they didn't say this, but they say in other places that we must find our own way. So whichever one of these suits the tools at your disposal, the tools in your toolbox. So, jhana, which almost everyone says is the most difficult because of the traps hidden within. I have friends that truly practice bhakti, devotion, chanting, mantras, songs. And this path will lead you very quickly to a blissful state. And depending on how sincere and depending on the hugest surrender, in my view, of the four paths. Devotion, love for your teacher, love for your guru, as the embodiment of the beyond. Jhana yoga has always been clearly the path for me, but for me it's been a 30-year process. I have friends that have I've seen living examples of bhakti, of devotion, but I've also seen karmic people who do good, continually, helpful service without expectation. And I also have friends that have kind of combined this selfless actions, karmic yoga, with bhakti yoga. But my point is here, find your own way. Don't wait for someone to gift you with this. Don't take anyone's word for what's best for you. You can take their word of what's worked for them. And I believe that a teacher oversteps their boundaries, or at least is not the correct teacher for me, who insists that it's their way or the highway, because it is not so. And even within the four that I mentioned, there's all kinds of variations. So you can custom tailor through your own listen for your truth. See what the world brings your way. practice surrender. Meditation, practice your meditations. Integral part of the process. So back to the mundane. Back to living in the world as you find it. Let's talk post-permanent awakening. People, the non-dualists, with a superficial understanding of non-duality, when they start to grasp the fact that none of what we thought as real had any substance, much less any claim, any remote claim to being real or reflection of reality. And for most, in each step up the ladder, for lack of a better immediate analogy, comes some challenges. And that makes it fun, doesn't it? If you keep the right spirit. In the spirit of not taking yourself too seriously. Not taking your mind chatter as anything other than mad monkeys chirping away, chatting away in a tree. Learning how to live in the mundane world is one of those challenges I just talked about, an unavoidable challenge. And the fewer people, just a suggestion, the fewer people you tell of your arrival at permanent awakening, the less challenges you'll have going into the future. Because the expectations of those people and their idea what is an awakened person as a holy being, blissed out, who's successfully mastered their mind, who resides in clarity and stillness. So you need to review. A personal review for me here is, what of these expectations that people hold, which I admit to sharing in my ignorance of what a awakened being truly was, which of these things have I, or still a work in progress, even though I've experienced permanent awakening? And again, just as an aside here, you'll know it when it happens. So, share less. But if you're like me, you're so full of wonder, joy, that you do want to share this. It's only natural to want to share with this to those closest to you. But they may become your biggest obstacle. Their expectations, and especially they know you and they see all that doesn't transform, all that remains. So we're looking at which elements. Well, there's elements of bhakti yoga, the complete surrender, that honestly I'm still working on. And part of it had to do with my deep understanding that looking to someone else to give me only what I could find. So to worship a guru when all I needed was gentle guidance, gentle suggestions, gentle support. So surrendering to any kind of teacher was never in my playbook. I didn't even come close because I was confused between surrender and worship. And this is, herein lies the biggest trap for teachers when they start to think that they're divine on earth, any different than us. We all have divinity within. We're only at different points of discovery. So surrender. I have surrendered to what is so. Because there's no point in not surrendering, not accepting. Surrender in the sense of accepting. Accepting myself as I found myself. Accepting the universe as it finds me. And the Zen teaching, the more superficial, I might add, the more understood Zen teaching, at least on my part, was quieting the mind. And through that stillness comes clarity. Through that taming of the mind, the best I managed to accomplish is ignoring it. And honestly, in my chosen path of jhana yoga, the way through inquiry, the way from transforming information to knowledge to wisdom, requires a mind. So it seemed counterintuitive, counterproductive for me to shut it up. It was useful in the progression, but it has a lot of traps, which mean that years of intense scrutiny on a personal level, looking into the mirror and working with the reflection, understanding when that image comes back to you, somewhere in that image is reality, and the rest is less than. So this quieting, this stillness is a part of my life, but it's beyond, it's on top of the mind chatter. Mind chatter, it's very easy for me to dismiss as a movie, as entertainment. And I mentioned before that I like to put my mind, after all, we're gifted with fine minds. It can't be just something to overcome. It must have a purpose and a use, because I've seen that all that is real around me is not without purpose, without guidance, without the hand of forces beyond our limited facilities to grasp. So this stillness comes, clarity comes, but it's just like bliss. It's not, it never has been a permanent, all-encompassing way that I pass my time. And for me, that makes it more valuable when I get those peaks of, I can peak at bliss and see that it goes to ecstasy and rapture. And all three of those things, each incrementally more difficult to maintain in a physical form. I still have to get up in the morning. I still have to feed myself. I still have to do. I still have human doings. I can't surrender 100% to a human being. You have to practice your being while doing what's necessary. And the trap I mentioned earlier that people starting to reconcile, starting to see the world as in this true form of non-dualism, want to dismiss the mundane, the ordinary, as illusion. So what's the point? The point is, as long as you're in this form, you have to continue while knowing that indeed nothing is real. But you have to continue your doings as long as you're in the body. Unless you're lucky enough that someone else is taking care of you. Someone has to do those things for you. And most of us aren't provided with an environment where we can live in bliss, where we can glimpse ecstasy, rapture, where our mind can be silenced. And from this silencing comes clarity. So what I wanted to share with you that in my own life, I embrace the ordinary. I surrender to the mundane. There's things that I have to keep doing every day. As long as I'm not in this form, or as long as the world doesn't provide me with an opportunity where I can spend all my time blissed, clear, silent. But until such day, I continue to deal with the mundane. And not only deal with it, but embrace it for the beauty and being thankful and grateful to have the opportunity to even have to deal with this mundane world. The beauty and the strength. It's like tempered steel sharpening the sword. All these things are preparing you for your work that awaits you once you leave this shell and don't need to come back unless you choose to do so. It's hard to understand when you have heard or you hear of somebody who's either self-proclaimed or others support this person's ascension to permanent awakening. And you're surprised to see elements of personality. But these things persist. It's the personality, as I've said before, that dies with the body. And when we come back again, after this personal expression, this drop that merges in the ocean, when our time, if and when we need to come again, we'll have a new personality, blessed with not being able to remember, for most of us, the lives before. That's really a gift, it's a blessing. Having glimpsed past incarnations as part of the process that I went through, you can only guess, or you have to trust me. If you find yourself able to trust me, that you would almost stop functioning. If you think you have a lot in this life to be guilty, to feel guilty about, to feel less than, multiply it by tens of thousands, and you begin to get an idea of, indeed, how that would look. So, personality remains. And the personality quirks. Quick to anger, perhaps, but done more intentionally, because anger does have a purpose. Look at Christ in the New Testament when he charged the temple of the money changers and yelled and scattered their monies to the winds. It's kind of a self-righteous anger, but probably closer to unself-righteous anger. So know this: your teacher, your friend, who are well on the way on their spiritual path, judge them not so harshly. Understand that perhaps you don't understand. You've been deceived about what a spiritual person is versus what you believe they should be.